With the upcoming release of Doctor Sleep, a sequel to the 1980s horror film The Shining, I thought it would be a good time to re-explore one of my favourite horror movies. And I'll also seek to answer the question, what made The Shining so scary? Welcome to Sam's Cup of Tea. The Shining was directed by Stanley Kubrick and is an adaptation of the book of the same name. It stars Jack Nicholson as Jack Torrance, Shelley Duvall as his wife Wendy, and Danny Lloyd as the younger son Danny. The film takes many deviations from the book, so much so that famously Stephen King is said to hate the movie completely. There are said to be huge fans of the movies and huge fans of the books, and some people cross over and like both interpretations, and some really prefer the book, and some just prefer the movie. I myself have never read the book, so I won't comment on which is the superior version. From its credentials alone, The Shining reeks quality, with the legendary Stanley Kubrick at its helm. And it features a small but fantastic cast, and not to mention the legendary performance from Jack Nicholson. His role in The Shining is one of the cornerstones of his massive legacy and reputation. The plot follows a young boy, Danny Torrance, who has a strange gift or affliction, whichever way you want to look at it, that allows him to see and hear things that others cannot. He kind of communicates with his little finger, and it's almost like a kind of insightful being that can tell him things of the future, premonitions. Meanwhile, his father, Jack Torrance, played by Jack Nicholson, is a writer who, at the beginning of the film, secures a job to look after a hotel, the Overlook Hotel, during the winter. This, he hopes, will offer him the required isolation, time, and also the ability to earn money while he writes his book. The prospect makes sense, and it seems like a perfectly rational thing to do in his family's position. And so the family trio load up their little yellow Beetle and drive up the Rockies towards the ominous Overlook Hotel. The hotel is isolated and huge. As they arrive, everyone is leaving before the mountain passes become blocked because of the winter. So guests are coming in and out, and staff are doing little maintenance things and taking things out. So the place seems quite bustling. That is until they all soon leave. And it is from here where the horror begins. There is an oddness, like a dark energy of sorts, which seems to emanate from the walls and rooms of the hotel itself. Only Danny, with his shining abilities, seems to be able to see this, and obviously us, the viewers. As the film goes on, these hideous visions and apparitions begin to intensify as the weight of the hotel starts to weigh heavily on each member of the family. But it is Jack Nicholson's character which is affected the most. He soon begins a rapid decline into madness and delusion. This is handled and conveyed expertly as we uncover the past struggles with alcoholism and an incident whereby he'd struck Danny years ago. The apparitions play to these memories and speak to his father. You see the isolation start to wear on him with different shots of him over time, and then eventually it leads to him talking to members of the hotel that aren't really there. These are the ghostly and evil apparitions that are sort of pushing his father in a direction to kind of do something awful. As I mentioned, his father had problems with alcohol, and there is a moment when he's offered alcohol by a bartender that isn't there. So in his own head, he's getting drunk, he's drinking, and to this apparition, he discusses an event that happened in the past and says that, you know, they resent him because of he struck his son once accidentally. The apparitions then manipulate this and kind of turn him against his own family. And it's these apparitions and the isolation which eventually serve as a cocktail, which leads him into a murderous rampage of his family, with an axe, no less. There are many factors which make The Shining so effective in scaring the viewer and unsettling them, and why it's still superior to this day to most horror films, especially from the present. Firstly, there are barely any jump scares in this film. It doesn't rely on that to scare you, unlike modern films of today, which throw jump scares at you, and it's a done-to-death cheap technique that is old. Instead, Kubrick generates genuine tension and fear through a combination and synergy of factors. These factors begin with the score, which even today I think stands up as one of the most unique scores to any film. It utilizes haunting and conventional sounds. You don't hear the instruments, you don't think that's a trumpet, that's this, it's just really unsettling sounds. And married with this haunting audioscape is his use of mostly steady shots, which make the viewer really soak in the environment and the hotel. It places you, the audience, in the space, and so you have a real sense and tangible sense of the rooms, the different places. You know, for example, this is the lobby, and this is the room, and this is the corridor near this door. He proved this also in Clockwork Orange, which uses this abrasive lighting, aggressive colours, and all these patterns and inconsistencies that when I watch the Clockwork Orange, it isn't really a horror movie, but it unsettles me to watch it. It's just odd. There's just something not right about almost every scene that you see. It's either hideously bleak, or things have a consistent colour palette, or they have a really inconsistent colour palette. It's just very bizarre. It's hard to put your finger on just what makes them unsettling. This is the beauty of Kubrick's work. You're not really sure what it is, and usually in a movie it's like what's unsettling you is the darkness, so you think, oh, just put a light on. You have an idea or a sense of the solution to what's causing the kind of fear, but with Kubrick it's just, you just feel uncomfortable. There's just something that doesn't quite rhyme in your head about what you're seeing on screen visually. And The Shining is no different in that regard. When you think about a typical horror film, especially one that's maybe set in a haunted hotel, you imagine, cobwebs, dark corridors, deteriorated floorboards and things like that. But The Shining is the complete antithesis of that. It's not dark, it's really bright. There are barely any scenes in this that are obscured in darkness. There are no upturned floorboards or cobwebs. It's not decrepit. It's just been in use like the week before this whole thing starts. Guests were there and everything like that. Instead, he employs a very aggressive tone to the hotel. It's very inconsistent, but also very distinct. The lobby area has these rich brown, cream, red tones that permeate. And then there's another part of the hotel, the famous room 236 or whatever, that everybody makes conspiracy theories about, where Danny goes into. That is like a green tone. And then their living quarters, where Jack Torrance is sleeping, and there's a few scenes in there, that's kind of like a bluish hue. But all of this doesn't quite match together. It's kind of a mishmash of different, very, very bold designs. And there's just something very unsettling about it. It's really difficult to describe. And not only is the Overlook Hotel sort of unconventional as a haunted hotel, it's gone on to be one of the most famously recognised, instantly recognised set designs and places in pop culture. For example, Steven Spielberg's recent movie from 2018, Ready Player One, literally has a whole scene, a whole set piece set in the Overlook Hotel. And when I was at the cinema, I was like, holy shit, this is crazy. But obviously, Steven Spielberg put it in there because he knows that a lot of viewers are going to see this and instantly recognize it. And so Kubrick does this amazing job of avoiding the cliche style of a hotel, and yet standing, head and shoulders above any of the usual shit. It's got that kind of 70s, 60s, 70s vibe, a very noisy wallpaper, and it's just really, really well designed and instantly recognizable. Speaking of the different color tones, this film also has a room called the Gold Room. Literally, it is just gold. And again, that's unsettling. There's something bizarre about it. And you kind of see it when it's not quite lit right. There's nobody in there. It's like a ballroom. But you see it when there's literally nobody there. It's just Jack Torrance.
Hi, Lloyd.
And you see it kind of when there aren't any guests there and there's no ball happening, and Jack Torrance is just there, and he has this like drink with an apparition. He goes to the bar and it's not really there, but it's really, really weird. The cinematography of any Stanley Kubrick film is obviously masterful. We all know this. He's amazing. And The Shining, again, is no different. He knows just when to add these sporadic cuts and shots to create an atmosphere or tension or serve the story. But most of the film, like I said before, are these long shots or tracking shots that follow the characters. And it really does force the viewer to linger in that space. And there's a lot to be said about that. In a lot of ways, it serves the idea that the hotel is a character in and of itself. And as it goes on, you realise that it really is. It's integral to the plot of the movie, and it influences a lot of things, the space in and of itself. There isn't really a single antagonist. It is the actual hotel itself. One director that I've noticed that's taken direct influence from Kubrick and in fact The Shining has been Paul Thomas Anderson in There Will Be Blood. There Will Be Blood has the similar shots to The Shining, these long shots, and it's a very tense film. And the music, funnily enough, is one of the few scores that is kind of similar to The Shining. In fact, I'm not even sure if they've used like a sound from the soundtrack or something like that. But again, that film also focuses on these like long shots, these wide shots of the scenery, and you just kind of take it in as the music swells, and you just kind of feel like kind of unnerved by it. But The Shining also excels because it isn't just a horror movie. In a lot of ways, it's a psychological family drama. It's about a family that is falling apart. And there are scenes of domestic unrest and arguments. And you, as the movie goes on, you find out that there has been a lot of tension within the family that just kind of is brought out by the hotel.
There's someone else in the hotel with us. There's a crazy woman in one of the rooms. She tried to strangle Danny.
Are you out of your fucking mind?
Most of what makes The Shining scary isn't some kind of ghoul coming down the corridor, but it's the psychological aspect, or it's the idea of watching somebody go crazy. It takes a family that at the beginning seems very innocuous and nice, and then transforms the father into this like raving lunatic. It's terrifying because it isn't just a bunch of jump scares or sporadic cuts, but it's a slow sense of dread, rising dread. And with it, the supernatural features of the hotel get more and more audacious, and they show themselves even more, to the point where towards the end of the film, it's not just Danny that's seeing this, it's the mother as well that starts to see some of the crazy fucked up shit that he saw, and obviously the father too. It's almost as though the hotel comes alive and seizes the characters and kind of starts to manipulate them. And it's hinted at that the hotel holds dark memories within its walls, almost like a living person. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about The Shining in a video and didn't mention the axe scene, the most famous and iconic of all. It's the scene that's referenced in horror movie lists, and if you ever think about The Shining, people will say that scene. But the terror felt in that moment lends itself to the slow build that preceded it. By the time we get to that scene, which is very late on in the movie, it's very much earned, and it has so much more weight when you actually watch the film. Every time I watch the film and I watch Jack Nicholson's descent into madness, I find myself like shouting at the screen, going like, no, like almost like internally as well, hoping that he doesn't make those decisions, that he will just the last minute swerve off the path of madness. But it never happens that way. And Jack Nicholson is at his absolute best as he portrays this character that's kind of teetering on the edge of madness. It's brilliantly done. And what's great about The Shining is that every character motivation is clear, and it's not just like Jack Nicholson becomes just this cardboard cutout. You see his like descent into madness. It's shown on screen, and you see every step of that as the viewer. You understand Wendy's fear and confusion in the situation, and also the son as well, who is kind of trapped in the middle of all this and being able to sense all the supernatural stuff and kind of senses his father's like terrible fate and what he wants to do to the family. It's really well done, and it's a very character driven film as well as being kind of atmospheric. And the chaos all ends in this nail biting chase between the son and the father in this densely snowed up maze, and it's just one of the most tense finales to a movie I've ever seen, and it's fantastically done. All in all, The Shining is my favourite Stanley Kubrick film for sure, and perhaps my number one horror movie of all time. There just isn't anything that comes close to the quality of the film, as well as the scares that I feel. When I watch it again, it gives me that uneasy feeling, and for me, like, a film for me isn't scary if I'm just constantly jumping. A film for me is like how it makes me feel inside. Does it make me kind of dread? Do I feel the kind of dread and the unease? That is a mark of a good horror movie, and The Shining has that in spades. But not only that, it's just a quality film all round. The performances are great, and there is nothing that is compensated for just to get in a quick horror gag, or you know what I mean. It's very well done. So of course, The Shining is beyond my usual rating, my top rating, which is my cup of tea. So I will give this the best cup of tea rating. It is the best cup of tea. Now, this is reserved to like legendary movies. Thank you for watching this episode of my Retro Classics series. Please subscribe if you want more on films and video games and more videos. Also, stick around because I will be reviewing Dr. Sleep in the coming days. I'm seeing it today, so I will get a review up in the next few days for that, and you can see my honest opinions. I'm slightly nervous about seeing it because I really consider Shining to be at the absolute top, and I cannot see a modern film being able to do it justice. But I've heard good things, so we will see. Thank you for watching. Sam's Cup of Tea, signing off.
Sam's Cup